Hello and welcome back to Ambitious. I am pumped for today's topic, and I want to give you a little preview as to why I decided that I wanted to talk about this and kind of how this concept or this topic came to be. A little bit of a rewind. Over the last couple of events that I have been asked to speak at, I have been speaking about this topic at basically every single event. And so with this, I had talked to a lot of people at different stages of businesses. So again, people who were like hitting their first six figures. I helped people to integrate this who were seven figures, all the way up to multiple seven who were looking and thinking, I have some of these pieces of this framework that I have never integrated, and I really want to know how to do so. So I'm going to teach you a model that I've been teaching at a couple different events. And if there was ever an episode that I would give you some feedback on as to get a piece of paper and pen because you're going to need it, today's episode is one of those topics. And so today we're going to be going over what you will hear me talk at events about. We also talk about in our program, and we actually have a freebie that we have as like a training overview of this as well. And this is really in multiple different areas of our business. So something that I talk about all day, every day. And if you can guess the topic, we're talking content today. We're talking marketing and messaging. And the model I'm going to be going through today is what we call our elevation content model or elevation marketing model. And this kind of came to be as a little bit of a rewind. So obviously, if you know me, you know with my journey that I have been making content as the main way to generate clients for the last several years in my business. So I really have never done paid advertising. I've never really used any other technique. I very much was somebody who loved the idea of traction marketing. I loved the idea of me posting, it resonating with people. And then because it resonated, them reaching out to me to say, hey, how can I work with you? And so when we started to scale our business, we started to look at, well, like, how can we constantly develop what is content in the sense of like what is, not just inspiration, education, and all the classic things we're taught when we first start a business, but how can we really refine this to be truly a brand building, community nurturing, sales generating machine. And so this is a model that really has been in the works over the last several years, kind of taking shape with a lot of the testing and a lot of the things that we've been integrating. And I have to give credit where credit is due because my coach, George, that I had hired was somebody who taught me some of the pieces we're going to be teaching today. We basically had my model that I'd been working on for years of kind of like the way that I was doing things and the way that I was generating clients. And then when him and I started working together, I started to realize there was pieces of the brand and building a movement and building a community aspect that he taught. And I thought, well, what if these two models had basically like a baby and they came together and were able to create kind of like a hybrid that was not only helping to generate new attention, nurture an audience, convert them, but also simultaneously was building brand and building community. And so basically the two of us started to workshop together, and I was like, I think we should make this a combo model. Here's kind of what I'm thinking. And he was like 100% like, go teach it. So I have taught this at his events. I just got actually back from teaching at his event in Montana, teaching the specific model that I'm going to run you through today. And so this model is in sequential order. So this is actually a leveled system. So what I mean by that is as I go through the different phases of this model, this is something you're going to want to master phase 1 before you ever go to phase 2, before you ever go to phase 3. So this is not for all of those eager beavers. This is not something you're going to want to skip ahead on because really the lower fundamental starting points are what you build on. And so if you don't have those, the model basically becomes ineffective. It's not something that will actually end up working or executing the way that you want to get you the results you're looking for. So without further ado, let's get into the elevation marketing model. So little context to this. I think that the thing that I've seen with all the clients that I've worked with all the businesses that I have been inside of, between service-based businesses, agencies, consulting businesses, coaching businesses, you name it, so many different businesses have used this model. And we've seen a complete range of amazing results within that, right? And so this is something that I will say, before I ever teach something, I always am sure to basically have data to back up the fact that it does work, that it is effective, and that I can get the results that I want it to before I ever obviously bring this to the masses, hence to you. And so I have tested this throughout different industries. It's wildly effective. And with this really, again, was filling a gap that I saw because I think that there's so much disjointed strategy in business, right? We've got things that are really, really good for maybe building brand, but then we're like, but then that's not building sales for me. Or we feel like it's building sales, but then you're like, it's all sell, sell, sell. And there's not really any like, nurturing when it comes to my marketing. So we saw so many gaps that we were realizing like, okay, like it always felt like you had to choose. You had to choose to build brand, choose to generate leads, or choose to generate sales. And so the thought process, as all entrepreneurs want to know, is can't we have it all? And so we can when it comes to this model and how we're going to be talking about this today. So let's go into phase one of the elevation content model. And kind of if you want to think about this like a visual for all my visual learners, this is very much going to be basically like a pyramid. Okay. So that's how I want you to think about these phases because it all leads toward the end point, which is the post or the marketing that you're going to release to the world on any given social media platform. And that is something that I will say I want to preface with this model. This model is not something that's specific to a platform. So this can be done. We have tested this with podcasts. We've tested this with Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, like you name it. We have tried this with every single type of platform and it works. So stage one, phase one is going to be really getting understanding of what your brand pillars are. And so the brand pillars, there's a lot of this term that's, thrown out basically in the online world in context to online business. What is a brand pillar? Where is it effective? Where is it necessary? How is it influential? And the basis of how I'm talking about it in the context of today is that I think you really got to get clarity of what the core things are that you talk about in your brand and in your marketing and messaging consistently. The thing that I have seen so many businesses struggle with is oftentimes they're like, but Kate, I talk about so many things. I can help clients with so many things. And I want to talk about all of it in my marketing. And I understand first of all, the mindset of that, because even for myself, working with clients, I work with them in legal and finance and marketing and sales, offer, product suite, systems, ops. Like there's just genuinely so many things that we support with. However, if you don't have consistency in your message, you don't have consistent nurturing of people who want that message. So the way that I explain this to people is kind of like a flavor. Okay. So let's just say your favorite flavor is vanilla. Maybe you like strawberry, maybe you like chocolate. At the end of the day, you're going to come back for that flavor of the thing that you're looking for again and again and again and again. So if you're constantly changing the flavors, one day it's chocolate, then it's strawberry, then it's vanilla, then it's caramel, then it's coffee, you feel like, I don't know when I'm going to get the flavor of what I'm looking for. And therefore, it's going to keep me from not coming back again and again because it's not having what I'm looking for. I'm looking for chocolate. If I only get chocolate, who knows when? And it's kind of like a random periodic thing that's kind of a surprise and there's no consistency to it. Then that tells me that I may not come back time and time again, which ultimately is something obviously that we know is going to impact not only the amount of people consuming your content, but obviously the people who get nurtured and then also buy from it as well. So the essence of phase one and the brand pillars is really to help us to get consistency. And so as an example for my business, in our brand buckets, typically, by the way, you want to have about 3 to 5 core topics, areas that you talk about within your marketing, within your messaging. And so for us, we basically have marketing, sales, offers and product suite, team, and then another one of our buckets is personal, which is like the CEO or / me as the CEO. So I either will talk about myself or I'll talk about things that people will want to know if they are somebody who is wanting to develop themselves as a person to become the CEO they need to have the business that they want. And so the thing that I will say is that I think that there's also a main takeaway I need you to remember when you're picking what these 3 to 5 things are for your business. These are things that your audience resonates with, not just things you want to talk about. And this is where we get in that kind of, fun space of market what they want, not what they need. And so I want to give you a little story around this because, for my business, when I first started marketing, again, in our programs, we still to this day do leadership and legal and systems and ops and so many different things. But what I came to discover was that legal and finance and leadership were 3 buckets that my audience, when I put it in my front-facing marketing, was not resonating with. We weren't getting a lot of bites on this. We weren't getting a lot of activation from our audience on that. And so what we came to realize basically was the fact that was something that while we did it inside the offer, didn't necessarily need to be marketed because it wasn't the reason that they were wanting to buy. Even though there was, P&Ls or something that I look at with businesses. We look at their legal. We look at how they can develop as a leader. All of those things are things that we dive into in coaching and we still do today. We don't market them aggressively. And we might mention it in the sense of the supports we have in our program, but we don't market it because it's not what they're searching for. Even though they might need it once they're in our program, it's not what they're searching for. And this is the thing that I think is an important reminder, is that the awareness level of the people that are inside of your program is very different than the awareness level of the people that are consuming your marketing. When someone comes into your world, into your service, into your coaching, they are somebody that has an awareness level of their problem and is basically able to see their problem from a different set of lenses and therefore sees it in a different way. When they're consuming our marketing, we have to remember that they're at a different stage of awareness. So because of that, they're going to consume the information different, and they're ultimately going to be looking for different information and trying to get relief on their problem or to achieve their goal. So when it comes to brand pillars, the thing I would caution you to start to think about is, what are the 3 to 5 things that you constantly talk about within your business right now? And how can we really look to distill those down to have those consistent in the front-facing marketing? The other thing that I also want to look at is, again, how can we make sure that these are things that they in fact are searching for and are wanting support with, not just things that you find interesting to talk about? And the way to know that is by actually looking at the data of the posts that you have put out. What are the core topics and themes that those cover? And that is a great indication for you to be able to kind of say, okay, great. Well, I've got, these 3 topics that I always talk about and they always resonate with my audience. And so now we have a basis to actually build some structure. And so the essence of brand pillars is marketing what they want, not what they need. It is having consistency. It is giving you structure. It is giving people a understanding of what they can rely on you for. And it's really making sure that when I come to your profile on whatever platform that is, that I know the core things I'm going to learn about. And again, let's even just take the podcast, right? When you tune into Ambitious, you're going to get mindset help. You know that you're going to get development of you as a leader and as a CEO, and you're going to get business strategies that pertain to the inner workings of your business from marketing, sales, team, and onward. But really, it's at the core base of what we do here. It is the development of the perspective, the development of the person, and then the process of how they generate their business, which is, the strategies underneath it. And for me, I basically rotate those 3 Ps when I'm looking to come up with concepts for the podcast. Because how would you feel if one day you tune into the podcast and I'm talking about, makeup, and then the next day I'm talking about marketing strategies, and then the next day I'm talking about, interior design, right? Like, whoa, what's going on? We don't know what's happening here in the sense of what can we rely on Kate for? And so I want to make sure that when you come to any platform, whether it's Ambitious, my Instagram, it could be an email list, it doesn't matter, again, what the actual facet is. We'll get to that in a second. It really does mean that you just know that you can rely on it and that there is consistency there. And so bucket number 1, phase 1 of this elevation marketing model is to make sure that you have core established brand pillars and themes of the topics you talk about that are in the lens of what your audience wants, not necessarily just what they need. Okay. So we're going to move up into phase 2. Phase 2 around pain points. And, the word pain point is kind of like the word moist for me. I don't know why. It just gives me the ick. And that's because I think pain points are when I say that, I can hazard to guess your natural reaction is oh, I know the pain points of my audience. I don't need this. I know the pain points of my audience. And I can tell you, over the plethora of businesses that I have worked with, very rarely do truly CEOs and businesses truly understand the pain points and desires of their audience. And the reason that I say that is it's not a matter of whether you just know them. It's a matter of whether you can verbalize them in an effective way that is supportive in marketing. And this is where the work comes in. Because when I say pain points or if I say desires, everyone's like, oh yeah, I know what the outcome is that my audience wants, or I know what they're struggling with. And I'm not doubting that you know what they're experiencing. I'm doubting oftentimes, because again, businesses that I've worked with, that I often see there's a big disconnect between the ability to vocalize it effectively. So that's what we're going to dive into with phase 2. So phase 2, this really dives into, there's 4 pieces into mastering phase 2. And they're what I actually call inside of our coaching, the 4S. And so the 4S model is something we teach in our programs. We teach this elevation model, and we also teach the specifics underneath it. So obviously today, for the purpose of today's episode, I'm going over this very, very high level, but I want to break down some of the details for you so you can kind of get a picture here of what's required for this to really generate the outcomes you want. So in the pain point aspect, there's a couple of different ways you need to be able to speak to it. And so I really explained to people that pain points. When you're in your service, when you're in, your done for you service, in your agency, in your coaching, in your consulting, you're talking about pain points and you're talking about desires in the lens of the facilitator. Like you're talking about it in the lens of how you talk about it with clients or how you talk about it with your team. But again, remember, like phase one, that means that the people you're talking to, though, have a different level of awareness than the people in your marketing. And so we have to make sure that we are able to shift between how we talk in delivery versus how we talk in marketing. And this is a way for you to do that. So one of the things that I require businesses to be able to do is to understand how to speak in symptoms. And one of the things that I see when people come to me when I look at their marketing is they're telling a lot about the source of the problem. So like, here's your issue. You're not doing well with this. This is your problem. You need to fix the following. Like it's all very diagnosis based. Like here's your issue. Here's your issue. And the example I give around this 4S model that's connected to understanding pain points is, in the midst of COVID, we saw that there was so many people, so many people who were basically diagnosing each other, right? So in the midst of COVID, you would tell, your mom or your aunt or your cousin or your sister to be like, oh, I feel a little bit sick. And they're like, oh my gosh, you might have COVID. And you're like, no, I think it's just probably a flu or like something like that. And they're like, well, do you have a fever? And you're like, well, yeah. And do you have a sore throat? Yeah. And how long's it been lasting? You're like, oh, 7 days. And you're like, And so you start to say yes, yes, yes to all these symptoms. And before you know it, you go, oh, I think I have COVID. And so that's because the person who was talking to you was directly assessing your symptoms. It's the same thing when we go to the doctor. They ask us what our symptoms are. And by understanding of the symptoms, they're then able to diagnose us. The same thing is true with effective and strategic marketing. Strategic marketing is something where the symptoms that are laid out in your posts, in your messaging, in any piece that I consume are so specifically spot on symptoms of what I'm experiencing that I then go, oh, that's my problem. And I start to resonate with the diagnosis. The problem I see is that a lot of businesses will go and diagnose through their marketing, but because they lack the symptoms aspect of it, no one is bought in on the fact that that actually is their diagnosis. They don't believe it to be true in themselves. Even though you might know it to be true, they don't believe it to be true because they haven't self-diagnosed, you've diagnosed them. And so the thing that I will say is one of the most impactful parts of our marketing, and that has really helped us to generate sales from our content and from our messaging, is the ability for people to be like, I saw this post and this is literally me. Like, the things you were talking about that I was doing, the feelings I was having, the mindset hurdles I was having, like that is literally me. And the reason people feel that way, the reason someone always is like, how does this person know what's going on in my world, in my head, in my current reality? The reason that you know those things is because you understand your ideal client and their pain points, desires, symptoms, and all the 4S's. The first of the 4S's is symptoms, which is the ability to talk about something that they're struggling with in specific verbiage of how they would experience that in their mind. What are they experiencing in their world? So what's like their current reality? What are things that are coming up for them in their day-to-day life that are a symbol of that problem? And it needs to be something that is descriptive. It's almost like it should be able to be seen like a movie. So for example, if someone has the pain point of struggling with marketing and messaging, that's the pain point. I'm like, hey, are you someone who feels like you don't have a content strategy or you don't have a marketing strategy? That's me telling them, hey, here's your problem. You don't have a strategy. But the reality is they're not going to resonate with, oh, you don't have a strategy. They're going to resonate with what not having a strategy looks like. So it typically means that they are potentially been online for a couple years now. They put out content day after day and they feel like it's feeling stale. They go to put it out. They make a post every single day, Monday to Friday, because they're told consistency is the main thing. But upon posting and posting and posting, they feel like they're not seeing any results. There's no engagement. They feel like they're talking into the ether. There's nobody, responding back with comments. They're not getting inbound inquiries. They're not getting any engagement or any type of response from their audience. So they wonder, is it even worth it? They're trying to keep up with the trends, trying to see, should I do reels? Is it a matter of doing more carousels? Am I selling too much? Am I selling not enough? And they start to question everything about what they're doing and wondering, what am I missing that's causing me to not generate sales? They probably consume other people online who are sharing screenshots of people moving and big sales numbers of launches and wondering, well, if they're on Instagram and I'm on Instagram, what are we doing differently that's causing them to have this massive surge of money when I feel like I'm struggling to convert a single client here? All of that is me describing their reality. It's not a matter of me being like, do you struggle and not have a content strategy? Or do you struggle and not have a marketing strategy? That's not going to resonate with people. They're going to resonate with the fact that they sit down and open up a Google Doc to write a caption and are staring at it for 60 minutes, only to then put a ton of energy into it and making this perfect curated reel for it to only generate nothing for their business. That's the reality that they know. They don't know what it means when I say you don't have a marketing strategy, right? Or they know that when they put out content and people say review the data and look at the metrics, they're like, I get what you're saying, but I'm looking at it and I don't know what actions I'm supposed to take from it. What does it mean? What does it say? So you just keep putting out more content in the belief that if you just put out one more post or one more week, that hopefully something will change. But 3 months later, you end up kind of in the same spot. Right? So those are symptoms. I'm describing it. You can see it like a movie, right? It's like when I said you open up a Google Doc to write a caption, you're literally picturing like Sarah opening up a Google Doc to go write a caption. So we want to have specifics, okay? So symptoms is the first S. The second S is going to be source, which is really a matter of what you already know, which is the person's pain point. So like, what is the issue they're having? What is the sticking point they're experiencing? And looking at how that is the core problem. So the source is really basically the diagnosis. What's their core problem? The third S is support, which is looking at specifically how do you help with that? So the thing that I'm seeing with a lot of people when they talk about, their offers and the way in which they are helping people is they talk a lot about the actual deliverables. They talk about the offer, the features, the details, the support. And the thing that's the issue with that is it doesn't really distinguish you as anything different, right? So it doesn't necessarily actually tell me specifically in what way are you going to help me to generate a different outcome. So this is really where we like to have people talk about their process. How is your process of generating results for somebody different than your competitor? How is your process or experience different? How do you guys approach this differently? Why is your program created with a different lens? What makes it unique? How is it different than anything else in the market? I want you to be able to describe that in all the things that you do. So again, back on the content example, if I'm speaking to content, I'm like, hey, here's the symptoms of what you're going through. Your issue is the fact you don't have a marketing strategy. What we help people to do is blank. I'm not going to say we help you to build a content strategy. I might explain that as, for example, in the essence of today's elevation model, I might explain that as, oftentimes when you work with people, they're going to be teaching you marketing strategy from the aspect of content pillars being the basis of how you build all of your content, helping you to, refine your hook and refine your call to action, things like that. But what we know is that marketing's job is to create visibility, nurturing, and conversion. And so what we do is we basically combine all the intentions that you're looking to have within your marketing into one core model, which is our elevation model. And it basically helps you to be able to generate new eyes, nurture your existing audience, build brand and community while also generating conversions without necessarily having to make it complicated and making it feel like it has 1,500 steps that you have to follow. It's a simple formula that basically our clients are able to rinse and repeat in their content. We help them to then understand and learn how to assess data to be able to make it even more intentional for their audience and how their audience is binging and consuming. That's me explaining what I'm going to help you do, mentioning my model that helps to do it, and it's talking about what's maybe a gap or a disconnect in some of the other ways that someone has learned this. So the thing that we want to look at with our support is I'm not talking about when you join Accelerator. I'm not talking about when we do a VIP day. I'm not talking about any of those things. And that's intentional because that's just a matter of the process of the program that I'm using to get you there. But that's not really what matters. What matters is how am I going to help you solve problems? And how am I doing it in a way that is specific and distinct and unique to me? And so that's really where the support bucket comes in. Now, solved is the last of the 4 S's. So again, remember, we've got symptoms, source, support, and solved as the last one. Solved is really a matter of being able to effectively communicate not only the reality and the symptoms of again, we know with symptoms, we had the pain points. We're doing the contrast now. We're talking about the specific picture in detail of what they need to be able to see of their dream. And so when you speak to solved, it's basically asking yourself the question, if someone was to work with you and to overcome this problem, to learn that process we talked about, who had those symptoms when they came to you, when they fix that, what will be their new reality, right? So like, again, back to our content example, they might be able to make a month's worth of content and have a month's worth of ideas and concepts within a 1-hour call of just sitting down and planning it. So they can literally build and outline a month's worth of content within 45 minutes or 60 minutes or less. They might be able to whip up a caption in half of the time because they know the structure to follow each time. They understand how to use this model to identify trends in their marketing so that when people talk about rinse and repeat, they know when they push a certain button, their audience is going to act every time because it's rooted in data. It's their own internal framework for their brand. Like they literally have the cheat code to their audience as a result of understanding these core pillars. That allows them to do, consistent sales, activate people on demand, build brand, generate consistent visibility and new eyes, building their following. Like there's all these things we can describe as the outcomes. That's the solved. The solved is basically being able to describe in detail what is somebody experiencing when they have solved this problem? What is their new reality going to look like in detail? And I want you to paint it like a picture for me so I can see it super, super clearly. So those are the 4 S's of understanding your pain points and messaging of your ideal client. And this is something that I want to say is not a one and done, which I know is not the advice that you want to hear. It is usually going to have a fundamental base that's pretty consistent of it. So like for me, I would say my ideal clients, pain points have generally speaking been the same for a majority of the time that I've been in my business. But the way in which they show up in the symptoms is going to be different. The things they desire to have happen are going to be different of those solutions, again, when it's solved. The process I'm using to help them to get there might change over time, right? So we want to make sure that we're updating this. And something I want to kind of give as a little tidbit to you is the symptoms and the solved component and the wording around it is very important. Again, remembering your audience's wording is much more important than the wording that you might be choosing to use. And so something that I really encourage people to do is to go through applications, go through your sales calls, go through any of the processes that you have where you speak with clients, even coaching calls that are the initial ones when they're first starting with you. Look at the language that they're using because that's something that we can ultimately use in your marketing messaging that will make your content of what you're saying resonate even deeper with the people that are consuming it. So that would be, to me, the pain point section, which is phase number 2. Phase 3 is something you probably have heard the online world talk about before. And you probably have heard myself talk about it before. But PAS is a fundamental structuring of messaging that has been used in my business, my clients' businesses in a variety of ways. So one of the things that we find with PAS, and just to kind of give you a little bit of a high level of PAS. So PAS stands for problem aware for the P. A is agitation. And S is solution content. So these are 3 different styles of messaging, i.e. lenses. And I want you to think about them almost as like flavors of how I deliver some type of message. So if I'm going to deliver something, am I going to talk about it in the sense of helping someone to realize they have a problem, helping them to realize they don't know how to do it on their own, or helping them to realize they need me to be able to do it? And so I'm going to kind of break down very high level PAS. Problem aware is really the themes around problem aware content in that lens are helping people with signs and symptoms. It's helping the ability for people to see they have a problem. And again, back to our aspect of the symptoms, helping them to self-diagnose. The intention of the PAS all being in your content in variety is the fact that each one of these helps people to get activated, and the people it activates are depending on the stage of the buying process. So when someone's at the very beginning of the buying process, they need problem-aware content to realize they even have a problem. But when someone has a problem, they need to be agitated to realize, oh, wait, I actually don't know how to do this on my own. All the things I've been trying haven't been working. And then when someone knows and says, okay, like I know I have a problem, I know that I can't do it on my own, they need to see opportunity of how you could help them to solve it, which is where the solution content comes in. So this really is something that I also want to preface. You may see people teach this, and I used to see people teach this in one core post. So what I mean by that is people would basically put P, A, and S all in one post. The thing that I ended up doing is I ended up chopping that down and basically saying, how can we separate these into different types of pieces of media and different types of pieces of marketing? Because then the way that PAS works is there's two ways you can use this in marketing in general. The way that we're talking about today is with evergreen marketing messaging, which basically means that you are selling something consistently pretty well all year round. The second way that you can use this, though, is with a launch model. And the launch model is basically the way I want you to think about evergreen is you move a person at a time. When you think about a launch, you're like basically herding sheep. You're moving masses of people at a time. And so for the purpose of today, the PAS we're going to talk about is for the day-to-day marketing that you're putting out. But you also, when you master this, can actually translate that clarity and understanding of this model. And you can actually translate that into using that for launching and helping you to be able to use this in launch messaging as well. So PAS, the P stands for the problem aware. It's the signs and symptoms. It's helping someone to realize they have a problem. The A stands for agitation. Now, agitational content is really going to help people to resonate and connect with myths and mistakes. So this is really where we are trying to connect with where are they missing the mark? What are myths or things that they're hearing that they're believing that you don't personally believe to be true? And where are they making mistakes? What are things that maybe they're trying to do in an effort to solve their problem that are ultimately not helping them or supporting them to get to where they want to go? Then you've got solution. Solution is the lens of really where we are either going to solve it by educating them, or we can talk about our solution to talk about our offer and the way in which we could specifically help and support them, and talking about the ways that we've been able to help and support people in the past. So that really is an example of social proof. That can be talking about case studies of clients. It could be talking about like screenshots of proof of clients, right? Like all of that is something we would want in solution. So the PAS is basically when we talked about the pain points in phase 2, and we're now in phase 3, we're just going to decide in what lens do we want to talk about those pain points? In what lens? Do we want to talk about them in the symptom kind of way? Do we want to talk about it in the lens of where people are making mistakes? Or do we want to talk about it in the way in which they could solve it or what it looks like when it is already solved with you? And so the question I get around PAS is, how much should I do of each? And is there like, a certain day that I should be posting XYZ? No. The main thing that we're looking for with PAS and with this model in general is variety. And especially if you haven't had a marketing strategy up until now, we're going to want to make sure that we do have variety for your audience. Because basically what I do with clients is I help them in detail to flesh out each one of these sections. And then what we would do is we would put out consistent marketing, likely for 30 to 60 days around that. And during that time, I'm looking at the data to see the way their audience responds to it, because that basically tells me their audience's triggers. Like I can tell what moves your audience, why they're moving. I can tell all of that as long as I have structure before we post. If there's no rhyme or reason to anything you're putting out, the data doesn't really mean anything to us. Whereas when you have a structure like this and you put it out into marketing, now I'm like, okay, great. Like I can see the trends we're seeing and therefore help you to lean into those further so that you have more of a predictability when it comes to your marketing. So as a high level recap here, we've got phase 1, your brand pillars, buckets, and themes. Phase 2 is those pain points and getting clarity of the messaging and the wording around your ideal client, and remembering that those are 4 different S's, 4 different columns or 4 different tones we have to be able to speak into to be able to really have clarity of messaging. The third phase is then picking, okay, do we want to talk about this in the P, problem aware way, the A, agitation way, or the S, solution way? Now going into pillar number 4, this is where we start to get the brand aspect coming in. So the thing that I will say that I saw with a lot of people's messaging that was like really a big disconnect is a lot of people talk about what to do or how to do it, or they'll talk about why to do it, but not how. They'll talk about the what, but not the why. The thing that we really want to do here is we want to make sure that we have the why in your marketing and in your messaging. A lot of the time when I consume people's marketing online, whether I'm just like aimlessly scrolling on TikTok or if I'm like doing an audit for someone, the thing that I see time and time again is that people are stating their beliefs, but you're not actually telling your audience why they should believe that to be true. So you're like, hey, ads are not the way to grow. Like if you're doing ads, this is not the way you're going to scale your company. Great. But why? Why is that not the way to scale? What's flawed about that model, right? Or what's something that you feel is the reason that that's wrong? The thing that's the disconnect in a lot of messaging is because we lack the why, your audience doesn't fully accept the belief that you're marketing to them. So instead, they're kind of like, okay, but they don't really necessarily fully absorb it as a belief because you haven't given them context to do so. So in this stage, there's two whys you have to be able to communicate. The first why is, why do you believe it to be true? And this is really important because if you're going to build brand, you have to have a lot of why. You have to have reasons why someone is going to believe you. Why should someone stand with you in that belief? Why is that a belief that you hold? All of that is something that has to be evident in what you're putting out consistently. And if it's not, we have to start to integrate that, because that's really how you're going to build community. Community and brand ultimately is a byproduct of people having a shared why. You have shared beliefs, shared values, a shared perspective that all of you have. And so because of that, and you marketing it, it basically means that by putting it in your messaging consistently, you're building this brand connection, this brand commitment with every single post. People are getting deeper and deeper connected and ingrained with your belief system. Now, there's number one, the why of why you believe it. But then the second why is also a matter of, why should they believe it to be true? Why should they care about this topic? Right? So, for me, kind of back, and again, not to say that this is like my belief, but it's just more a matter of, the example we were using. So we're going to keep rolling with it. Say, for example, someone uses paid advertising. Okay, well, I might say if I was a brand who was like anti-ads, which I wouldn't say I'm anti-ads, by the way, like I help ads agencies. I don't personally do ads in my business, but I understand where they're effective and where they're necessary. So when it comes to the why, say I was anti-ads, I might say, I don't believe that ads are the way to be able to scale your company, because if for us, we believe that organic is the number one way to be able to scale, because it helps you. Again, why is because it helps you to be able to not only build attention and inquiries and interest, but all the while actually does help you to build brand. So when we tell people to focus on organic content, we do that for the following reason, which is that it helps you to build brand while you're marketing, and it allows you to be able to test different types of messaging and different types of connection in any different platform for free. And most importantly, should you run out of money, should your ads get taken down, should whatever happen to your paid advertising, we know that if someone has an organic audience, if their ads disappear, their audience and their brand community is going to go search for them because they've built brand. If you only rely on ads and have not been building an organic brand this entire time, what it ultimately means is that when your ads turn off, your level of brand awareness also turns off. Your visibility also turns off. Your conversions also turn off. Whereas, for example, with organic, that's something that regardless of whether you spend or not is always going to be something working for you in the background. And oftentimes posts as far back as, 90 days to 6 months ago can also be something generating results for you. So that's me basically saying why I might not believe in ads, and what I believe about ads and why I believe that to be true. What is my justification? What is my reasoning behind what I'm stating to be my belief? Now, the second one here is, why should someone care about this topic? And there's two lenses in which you can talk about this in your marketing. So when you're trying to translate something you're talking to and why someone should care about it, there's two ways. There are two I's, by the way. One is the aspect of impact. So how is this going to impact them in a positive way if they were to do it? And the other I is, what is the implications of this? So what is the negative consequence if they don't do this? So for example, back to our aspect of organic marketing, if you were to build an organic audience, the impact of that is that you're able to test with your audience for free. You're able to build brand with every single post. There's no cost connected to the volume of how much you're ending up putting out. And they also, when you do decide to go do ads, if that's something that you decide to do to scale, the first thing someone's going to do when they go to paid advertising is, when I see an ad and I want to buy something, to justify to myself, okay, this is somebody that I can trust. This is something that I want to invest into. The first thing I'm going to go do is look to try to find that person on the internet to see, can I trust them? Do they have proof? Is this someone that I should be investing with? And so that's the impact, right? Like the impact of positively what it can do for you. Now, the implications, if you don't, I'm basically taking the same messaging you'll see here and I'm making it negative. It's just because, by the way, these two eyes, some people's audiences are very activated by messaging that is very positive, which is our impact. And some people's audiences, hello, hi, me, are very, like, I am somebody, when I consume someone's marketing, I am much more motivated by implication than I am from impact. So like very positive marketing messaging about the dream all the time, for me specifically, does not work. Like, it's not something that I would say activates me at all. Whereas I would say if somebody was like, here's what's going to happen to your business if you don't do this, and it was really on the domino or the negative consequences of something, that causes me to move 9 times out of 10, because it really shows me what lack of action will ultimately do for me and for my business. And so implication would be talking about the fact that, again, the negative consequences of what someone's going to have happen. So really, it's going to take what I just said in impact, and it's going to flip it on its head and make it basically told in the same way, but in a negative lens. So with the why and why, again, remembering this is stage 4, the why and why are, why do you believe it to be true and why should they care? And the way to be able to vocalize why they should care is speaking to the way it impacts them in a positive way, or the implications it has on them in a negative sense, or like what are the consequences that are potentially there. So with the why and why, again, remember, this is where the brand aspect is starting to come in. So all the while until now, we've been doing marketing, we're doing messaging, we refine that with the pain points, we are building a little bit into that sales process with the PAS now. Now we put in the why and why, which is integrating the brand lens. And now we then go to what is called scripture statements. And again, to give credit where credit is due, this is something that I did learn from George Bryant. And this was really around how to build a movement, how to build a like-minded community of people who just ate up what it was that you do and ultimately could reference this quickly in building brand. And so one of the things that I loved in our work together was the aspect of brand building, because for me, I was always looking at, we have a great community, we have a great brand as it is right now, but then I was like, well, how do we take it to the next level? Like, how do we really expand this and continue it to grow? And so that's where scripture statements came in. And so I want to tell you a little quick story actually about scripture statements. So just because they are so impactful. When I first started the podcast, I was kind of like around the time when I actually had started working with George. And so he had mentioned scripture statements to me. And I was like, I wonder if I integrated these into the podcast kind of thing to use that as a way to see if people resonate with it. And so we integrated scripture statements, which I'm going to explain to you in a second. And when we did this, I saw quick impact on scripture statements. And scripture statements, to give you a reference, are basically, if you think about your favorite song, you might not know all the lyrics to that song. You might not know all the words to that song, but you do know the chorus. And that's because there's a part of the overall thing that was memorable to you that you did remember, which in turn allows you to recall the entire thing at a moment's notice or at a given time. And so scripture statements kind of follow that same type of intention. And so scripture statements fall into 3 core buckets. So you'll see, obviously, by the way, as we're going through today, that you need to have frameworks. Everything I'm talking about today is a marketing messaging framework that has frameworks within each one of the steps. Like, they're all a list of principles. And this really is the basis, just to kind of break the fourth wall here. The frameworks are what allow things to be consistent. So the reason I talk to people about, like, scaling can be, it's not hard work, but it isn't complicated. The reason that I say that is because these are frameworks that allow us the ability to rinse and repeat strategies. Like, you'll see here, each part is really like a formula. And the most important thing is it's not a template. You can find yourself within it. But all of these are frameworks, and George is very much the same in the sense of everything that he teaches is a formula, and it's a framework that allows other people to have rinse and repeat results with it, because they actually have something that is a structure for them to implement and integrate over and over. And so scripture statements fall into 3 buckets, the 3 B's, which is basically brand would be the first one. 2 is going to be beliefs, and 3 is going to be behavior. Okay, so for example, I'll give some that you might know from me. So brand, at the end of every single episode, what do I say? stay ambitious, stay ambitious, stay ambitious, right? It's a brand statement that's associated with the podcast that has nothing to do with anything other than the fact that it's really only something that someone who's already consuming the brand would know. It's a brand community statement. Another one that is also, a big bucket is beliefs, which is the second B. So another one that I always say all the time is the obstacle is the opportunity. It's a way that I look at things in business. I look at things that come up in business as the problem is the path that we need to be leaning into. The disconnect is often the thing that will determine our success, right? Like that's the area we got to lean into. So the obstacle is the opportunity. Another one that I also have is if it's a pattern, it's a problem. And these are statements that are things that I always say to clients on the podcast, in content, like you name it, I've got it basically everywhere. And that's a belief. It's something that I'm basically talking about and unpacking that is a way for me to share a belief with someone. Then we've also got behavior. And so like one of the ones that we have for our team that's a quote is be the bison. I actually got recent information about this. I was at an event and someone was like, I obviously am from Toronto. Okay. So I had this at an intensive that we came up with coaching. And then I ended up meeting a coach who specifically works with farmers. And he was like, well, there's actually details around bison and how they moved. And I learned all the details around it. So all of this to say, bison, basically, when there is a storm, cattle typically will run away from the storm, whereas bison typically will run or go toward the storm to basically get through it quicker. So our belief around behavior is be the bison, which basically means run toward the storm and do the hard thing. So like when you see something is resistant, when you see something is not something that you want to do, it's not a reason to go away from it. It's a reason to run right into it. And so that's something that we have as a behavior scripture statement, which is basically a way in which to have a one-liner that teaches people the way in which we want them to operate. So the three categories, remember, are brand, beliefs, and behavior. The thing of why this is impactful, and kind of back to our story about the podcast to close the loop for you, when we started to get clarity of what these were, we asked our team, we tried to look at what our clients were hearing us say. We looked at things we always said in coaching calls, that we always said on meetings. Like we were always just like looking to try to find where were the areas where we were having repeated phrases over and over. And so I took those and I got clarity of those and I started to plant them in our marketing intentionally. Like I would say, okay, well, like, what kind of like core statement can we have? At the end of every episode, we end now with stay ambitious. That's our brand statement. You'll often hear me like today, you heard me share a couple of my beliefs and behavior ones. I've also mentioned them in probably every single other episode, sometimes just, automatically and in a natural way. But sometimes I'm trying to be like, okay, well, how can I distill the essence of what I'm trying to teach here into a statement so that's memorable? And so when we launched the podcast, we generated like multiple six figures from our podcast in the first couple episodes of people listening. And I actually greatly attribute that to some of the model we've talked about today, but also the big theme was the scripture statements. And I'll tell you why. When I got on consults with people who ultimately ended up signing, who were people who listened to the podcast, what I very much started to realize was that when people were listening to the podcast, they were having these one-liners. They're like, Kate, I heard you say if it's a pattern, it's a problem. And that made me realize like I have a lot of patterns I'm seeing in my life and they're not changing. They're kind of rinse and repeating, which means in turn, I have a lot of problems in front of me that I need to address. And so I was like, okay. And then someone came to me and they're like, I realized that I needed coaching because I was so resistant to it. And then you said like the obstacle is the opportunity. And they were looking at the fact that they were feeling strapped financially and they weren't sure if coaching was the right time. And then they were like, I tried to look at, okay, well, like, how is me not knowing how to make sales actually the reason why I need coaching? Like, it's not a reason to not do coaching. It's a reason to do coaching because I saw the obstacle as an opportunity. And so when I started to hear and get on these consults, you can imagine I'm like, and I'm hearing these lines in front of me. I'm hearing these people share these phrases and these one-liners that were in these podcasts. And all of them are referencing scripture statements. And it's interesting because I said to them, what episode was that? And they're like, oh, I don't know. I just remember you saying blank. And it was such a testament to me of the impact of brand statements, of belief statements, of behavior statements, right? The impact of, which is this category, scripture statements. they're a way for our audience to quickly and easily reference a concept from us because they remember the line, because they remember the chorus of the song, not all the lyrics. And so just by knowing my quote unquote chorus or the phrase that I say, they're able to easily recall the full concept of whatever it is I was talking about and make it feel like it's something that they could easily remember. And so when I started to see that I had multiple sales coming in from people who were referencing scripture statements, I was like, okay, hold the phone. We need to take a pause here and make sure that we are planting and being intentional about the way in which we're creating brand moments in almost every single thing that we do and create. Because without that, we're not making something memorable. And if we're not making it memorable, they can't make it something they can easily recall. So that was something we put in as a very intentional effort. And we actually integrate now, as you'll see, as part of our marketing model. So again, high level, we've gone over brand pillars, pain points, PAS, why and why, and scripture statements. The last, and I have this last for a reason, is format. And that's really saying, okay, with all the messaging that we've done till now. So again, we've covered a little bit of prepping for conversion, marketing messaging, building brand. Now comes the aspect of how do we want to deliver this to the world? And as I said at the earlier part of today's episode, this model works for any kind of deliverable. It can work for a podcast. It can work for, TikTok. It can work for Instagram. We've seen it work for email. There's just so many ways that you can use this. And so format is looking at the message that you have. How would that be best translated? How is that something that you could see being put out to the world? So is it through a reel? Is it a carousel? Is it a podcast? Is it a TikTok? Is it an email? The reason we want to know and actually have structure around you choosing the format is you're going to find once you start to implement a framework like this, and again, this is a very high level because usually this is something that we teach over several sessions in the sense of we have separate trainings associated with each one of these things. But what we typically will do is we look at, okay, well, if say the brand pillar was marketing and we looked at pulling a pain point around marketing and then we talked about it in an agitating way and we did that through a reel, you might find, and this is where the fun part comes in, you might find with your audience that your audience has literal formulas that when you push that button, and what I mean by that is put out a post like that, when you push that button, they move. That's not a coincidence. When people talk about rinse and repeat marketing, they're like, is that actually a thing? I'm like, 100% it's a thing. The difference is it's not a thing with your coach's content calendar. It's a thing with your audience. So the true basis of how to get true rinse and repeat marketing, i.e. I press this button and people buy, or people move, or people, get deeper connected to your brand, whatever the goal might be, the way that happens is actually by you having structure, then taking that structure, posting it, we get the data of it, we see what caused people to move, we put that out again, and then once it happens a second and third time, we now actually have the quote unquote triggers for your audience that you can rinse and repeat, which is where predictability in marketing starts to come in. Now, I want to kind of put a bow on this with something that I often get as a question. Because listen, if you guys listen to the episodes, you know me, I am a little strategy nerd. I'm very structured. I'm very type A, generally speaking. And it's, it's something I'm working on. Okay. I'm trying to have more flow, trying to have more fluidity in the way that I do things. But I love frameworks and I love structure because when I have frameworks, I'm able to rely on something. I know why it's working or I know why it's not working. But I fully recognize as a coach that knows some people don't operate the way that I do, and that also our brain is not always going to come up with concepts in, buckets like this or steps like this. The thing that I really recognize is that you can also come back through this model and go back through it a different way. So one way this model is used is to help, teams and businesses to be able to plan their marketing and their messaging with intention. But you can also use this to clarify natural, kind of instinctive, intuitive types of ideas for posts. So here's what I mean by that. If you're somebody who's on a walk and you have like a random idea that you want to put in your marketing, you're like, I just feel called to speak about XYZ. That's okay. What I would actually ask you to do is put that post out, create that post, but then afterwards, go through this model and label it after the fact. Say, okay, well, what pillar was that? Would that be considered problem aware, agitation, or solution? did that include any scripture statements in it? Like I would almost go through it afterwards as an aspect of awareness rather than trying to have this be like perfect buckets that you go through before you ever put something out. And I also want to add that this is a model that does take, as I said, like this is the very high level of it. I get a lot of questions about it. Also, by the way, we do have a training that has us going over it. So if you do want that, just literally shoot me a DM that says the word elevation and I'll know what you're talking about. It's a resource that we have that's a training and a guide that kind of goes over it a little bit more in depth. And so what we find is when people are going through this, they're like, okay, maybe you have marketing strategy right now and you want to use this to refine it. Or you might be like, this is the first exposure that I'm having to like an intentional marketing strategy and this is feeling super overwhelming. That's okay because this is something that took us a good minute to be able to get clarity on. As I said, this was something that I built alongside, again, the added pieces in the last year that I've been working on for probably like 5 years now in the sense of refining the elements of. And so I think it is really, really important that you also recognize this is going to get easier the more reps that you put in and the more times that you actually execute this. So this is like of marketing. If I was going to give you like my masterclass of like the ITI way of marketing, this is like stage 1 of basically getting an understanding of how to get consistency. After this, we go into data, we go into understanding and identifying your buyer types, we go into all of the other pieces that are after you put up the post. That's its own whole separate thing. But for today, this is really a matter of giving yourself structure and intention and like a fundamental framework to operate from so you kind of have a basis to know why things are working or why they're not working in your business and in your marketing. So all of that to say, I know that so many people nerd out on marketing and messaging. And so this is something I would love to give you the inspiration and the homework of going and trying to press go on. Take a step of it. Take maybe phase 1 or phase 2. Maybe you want to just start planting scripture statements as one of the first pieces that you integrate. Take a nugget of this. Take a little bite off of this and say, okay, great. I'm going to start to integrate that into my stuff to try to get some consistency there. And I really am excited to see this take shape for you because I've seen this do absolutely monumental things for our clients. And I know what this can do if you were to master this and start to integrate it for yourself. So hope today's episode was helpful for you on all things marketing. And as always, you guys, if you have questions on anything, if you're kind of like, hey, wondering about the following, or you want to follow up on today, or maybe you just even had a point of clarity listening and you're like, I realized that maybe I've been doing this the whole time on some of these pieces and I didn't even realize, and now I have an intention around it. You know that I love to hear from you. And so any feedback and any discussion or insight you have, I'm always excited to dive in with you. So all of that to say, I hope you have an amazing rest of your week. And as always, stay ambitious.